Hi everyone, welcome back to another Introverted Indies author interview. I'm Lucy A. McLaren, and alongside Lydia Baker, I run Introverted Indies, which is currently a YouTube channel, although we'll be looking to expand onto other platforms. But currently just a YouTube channel to basically chat to fellow indie authors, talk about upcoming books, writing tips, writing advice, anything really. Just getting to know other authors because we know how difficult it can be being an indie author, trying to get the word out there about your books, especially when a lot of us are introverts as well. So today I'm joined by DL Lewellyn. I'll hand over to you, Darcy, to introduce yourself more thoroughly. Do tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Lucy. Um, I really appreciate being here and the platform you provide. You guys are providing for indie authors. I think that's awesome, and I
Thank you.
hope you're finding some success and getting people out there. So we we need all that exposure we can get, and
Hmm.
I enjoy connecting with people in all different ways. So I'm really appreciate being able to do that today. Um, yeah, so my writing name is DL Lewellyn. You can call me Darci, and I started writing kind of late in life, and about 3 years ago, 2020, 2021. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But it was kind of a surprising new passion that just came out of nowhere. Well, a little bit behind that, but
Hmm.
it's been a real pleasure, a joy, and I haven't really stopped since I started. So, out of all the crafting and creative outlets I've had over my lifetime, writing has really set me on fire, and I'm still burning. I have a husband because I guess I need to talk a little bit more about myself. But I have a husband, a couple dogs, live on a couple acres in front of a big, beautiful mountain, and and I retired. I was able to retire a little early, so I could write, and so I'm enjoying the twilight years. I don't know if I want to put it that way, but it's enjoyable.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you came to writing a little bit later in life. 2020 is when you started on this pursuit. Tell me a bit more about that. Like what kicked off your kind of urge to write? What made you write that first book?
Yeah, well, it was definitely the pandemic, which, I've heard over and over again. I interview authors too, and I've been interviewing authors for the last 3 years, and that seems to be a common motivator,
Hmm.
inspirer, which is nice that something good came out of that for a lot of people. But I spent the summer of 2020 inspired by my niece who started reading a lot of paranormal romances, romantasy, what we're calling it romantasy these days.
Hmm.
Um, and so I was introduced to some authors, and I am a crafter, so it was just kind of a natural thing to start doing audiobooks and while I was crafting, and I blazed through about 190 books. A lot of those were,
Wow.
a lot of fantasy writers do series, so a lot of those were big series, like 12-book series, which
Hmm.
was awesome because just hours and hours and hours of being lost in
Yeah.
these great stories. And so I think I just absorbed. I just like consumed these different styles, these writers, the type of stories, and I love the fantasy. I've always liked fantasy, but romance is my main
Hmm.
great genre that I love all my life. But I read a lot of different genres, and I've read you know hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books over my lifetime. But that summer, I just soaked up a whole new genre, and
Mm.
by the end of it, I just sat down and said, I want to try one of these myself. I want to see if I can do this. So that's what happened.
Hmm. Yeah. And so would you describe your book or your books as romantic or paranormal romance, or like how would you define them?
Yeah, they're paranormal romance. It was kind of hard to settle into a genre that so you could sit it on a shelf and market it that accordingly,
Hmm.
but because I kind of spilled over into some little sci-fis in there,
Hmm.
and I absorbed so much that I just really wanted to. When I started writing, all that stuff came into my story, and it's just a blast to be able to have so many things to expand your horizons as far as,
Yeah.
you know, your characters and your backgrounds and settings and everything. So, yeah, so I do, you know, my series is about shifters, you know, animal
Mhm.
shifters. So, but there's vampires, there's fae, there's witches, there's even some aliens. So I have, you know, just about everything in that story because it's a
Yeah.
long 3-book series
Mhm.
that kind of goes on an adventure. And so we meet lots of different great characters. And I like to set my stories in familiar places that I'm, you know, that I know that I've lived around.
Mhm.
And bring the fantasy world sort of lives parallel unbeknownst to humans. So that's kind of my favorite way to delve into fantasy.
Mm.
But you can still do a lot of world building, you know. So I got to have a
Yeah.
lot of fun with that, and I'm kind of expanding into that more with my spin-offs from that series.
That's your Ursa Borealis series. Is that what it's called? Am I saying
Yes,
that
Ursa
right?
Borealis is
Yes.
book one.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
is that the book that you started with? There it is. Beautiful
Yeah, so
cover.
that's my,
Mhm.
well, I have to say, my first run through, I wrote the whole series
Wow.
and then went back and split it up, I guess is a good way to
Right.
say, and, you know, broke it into books and
Mhm.
expanded, of course. So I ended up with, you know, book one, and I published that July 2021, right, you know,
Mhm.
6 months after I started writing. A little too soon, but I learned my lessons.
Mhm.
And then book two is that got published that December, and then it took me a couple years to finish this big guy. So this is my
Yeah.
third book, and I just did the wraparound covers this year, so I'm really excited about that.
It's lovely. Yeah.
So yeah, so it's called this really the Starlight Chronicles, and books one through
Right.
three. So Ursus
Mhm.
Borealis is the first one.
Okay. So what would you say you've learned then? Because you said obviously you published Ursus Borealis 6 months after you started writing. And the thing is, like writing is one of those things that you do. The more you do it, the more you learn and kind of grow as a writer, don't you? So what would you say you kind of feel like you know now that you didn't know then?
Well, there's so many areas. When I started writing, I didn't know anything about writing, but I have a good command of the English language. I was an administrative assistant and paralegal for my
Mhm.
career, and so I did nothing but edit and write business documents and legal documents. So that helped. But as
Mhm.
far as structuring a story, you know, what I had was my reading experience,
Mhm.
and I had just absorbed so many stories, and like I said, series of stories. So you know, I
Mm.
had a really good idea of how a story should flow. Thank
Yeah.
goodness. So my instincts were good, but then you start learning a little bit more about, you know, the showing versus telling, and
Mm.
you know, your overuse of adverbs, or where, you know, dialogue tags, you know, all those sort of things are not something that, you know, when you start writing and you don't know about writing,
Mm.
or you aren't a writer, you don't know about those things until you start learning them. And so I wished I would have, you know, had more of that experience before I published, but it is what it is. And
Mhm.
you know, it's been an exciting journey. And then, of course, you know, while I was publishing, I mean, I had to learn how to self publish as well. So I was learning all
Yeah.
that part of the business at the same
Mm.
time. So it's kind of astounds me when I look back at how much I've learned in really kind of a short time. I mean, we're going into 4 years now.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You packed a lot in there for that first kind of 6 months to a year where you wrote the book. I assume kind of did some editing and stuff like that before you released it, learned how to self-publish it, got the cover done, like learning how to self-publish, like you said, that's a whole other aspect of it, you know. It's completely separate to writing the book. Um, and you were working full time at that time, weren't you, as well?
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot to
Yep.
juggle.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's true what they say, that the more you do, the more you can get done. So it was a crazy ride, but
Mm,
and I really thought when I retired that things would slow down. You know,
no?
I sit at my keyboard pretty much writing full time. So,
Wow,
and
do
then, you
you?
know, then you've got
Hmm.
still got the marketing and the social media and reaching out to
Yeah.
people. And I haven't even done that locally. You know, I know you sit on panels and do all that sort of thing. And,
Hmm.
you know, I've always wanted to branch out to that. I'm kind of I live in a rural area, so I'm not close. I'm not horribly far from cities, but it's
Hmm.
just like I kind of get out here and it's hard to think about going into town and getting into the world and doing it that way. So
Yeah.
I do pretty much everything online. But one of these days, I hope to branch out into the local book scene because we've got some nice things around here. I guess Las Vegas has a pretty big conference every year,
Mm.
which just to clarify for those of you in the UK and stuff, Las Vegas is not close to me. It's Nevada. I live in Nevada, but I'm in
Hmm.
northern Nevada, so Las Vegas is like 8 hours away from me,
Wow.
drive wise. But it's still doable for going to conferences and stuff. So one of these
Mm.
days, I forget what that conference is called. It's a writers' conference. It's a big one.
I've heard of it. The
I guess
name escapes me as well,
maybe
but yeah.
into it, but
Yeah, I know what you mean. I've definitely heard of that one.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
but
I'm
I feel
smoking
like that's,
potatoes right now.
well, the thing is, right, when the kind of online space um is useful, right? Because when you're in a position like yourself where it's not necessarily that you can go to many conventions, or there's a cost to that. We can't ignore that. It costs money, it takes time and energy, and things that not necessarily every writer is able to give. And so having the online space as an option is very helpful. But I feel like it's also at the same time a bit of a blessing and a curse because it's such a balance to strike. To You got to put the marketing time into social media and newsletters and whatever else you want to be running. At the same time, you don't want that eating into the actual thing that you're passionate about, which is the writing the books, right? Because you don't put the time into that. There's nothing to market anyway. So how do you find that kind of balance? Because like you said, you're doing writing full time, but does that encompass everything that you're doing?
Yes, it does. And I'm kind of I fly by the seat of my pants, so I'm definitely a pantser,
Hmm.
writing and all the business aspects of it.
Hmm.
So I'll maybe spend a few hours writing, and then I'm just like, I need a break. So then I'll just switch to something else, and
Yeah.
maybe do a little promo art. I love Canva. I do like creating. Because I am, I do love arts and crafts, and so
Hmm.
I enjoy the design part of it and the challenges of trying to strike that those catchy promos
Hmm.
and posts, and building that that community.
Hmm.
um, and speaking of community, I do spend some of my time with other writers, chatting, sharing stories, so there's that aspect of it too, which has been a
Hmm.
really fun surprise and aspect of the
Yeah.
journey. Um, I'm in a small writing group, and we meet once a month, and I really enjoy that outlet and that feedback, and it's been very helpful. Um, and when we talked about what I've learned from the beginning to now, those kind of things are really helpful.
Hmm.
Having reached out to other indie authors and a couple of bestsellers for my interviews, I've learned so much, about other writers' journeys, and you find that you might have taken some different paths, but there's so many commonalities that we all share,
Yeah.
and it's really valuable to be able to do like these kind of chats and let other authors know that they're not out there alone, and that they're following a lot of the same paths. Maybe we can
Hmm.
help them avoid mistakes, or at least encourage them that whatever they're learning, good or bad, is going to move them forward. So it's really nice to be
Yeah.
able to do that kind of thing too.
Yeah, absolutely. Because speaking of communities, I think, do we meet in the FSF Writers Alliance? I think that's where
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
which is it's a great group. It's free for all fantasy sci-fi writers to join. So if anyone's watching and wants to join, do check out the website. Just search for FSF Writers Alliance on Google. Stuff like that. It is so important, isn't it? Because without that connection, if writing can sometimes be a bit lonely, a bit is valuable having people going through similar experiences, whether that be the kind of the highs of finishing a draft or whatever, and the lows of writer's block and plot holes or rejection or whatever it is that you're feeling. Having that community of writers is a really valuable thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So you said that you are part of a monthly writers group. So what does that provide? Is it kind of like you're sharing your work with each other and giving critiques, or like what kind of stuff?
Yeah, that's basically it. Uh, Issa Tony is one of my writing group and of three. We
Hmm.
were a four, but now we're three. And but it's it's nice. We wanted to keep it small, so it would
Hmm.
be nice to have maybe another person. But we end up when we do our critique sessions at the end of the month after reading each other's submissions.
Hmm.
We're on video for chat for probably 2.5 hours. So,
Yeah,
having, critique, we have a lot of input for each other's work.
it's
So
great.
it's great. And so we look forward to it. And we're always really pumped after we finish, because we're just like jotting down, oh yeah, great idea, great idea, So it's like,
Yeah. Oh, 100%. It's, yeah, it's that kind of, yeah, just having other eyes, isn't it, on your work? Because we are just so close to it, we're so in it that you just don't notice things. You don't notice like little mistakes or repetitive phrases or things that don't make complete sense. So yeah, it sounds like it really gives you that kind of drive to keep going, gives you the feedback that you need to perhaps fix some little things as well. So it is great. So Starlight Chronicles, so it currently sits at 3 books. Is that finished? Is that a complete series?
yeah, so that story is finished. So
Hmm.
like I mentioned, I'm doing spin-offs. So basically what ended up in this story is we have a human, a woman who, doesn't know anything about the supernatural world, and she picks up and moves to a small town in the mountains. She's an artist and she wants to explore, her art and kind of change up her life a little bit and get away from the 9 to 5 grind. So she starts, she brings her sketchbook to a local pub bar, and it's kind of a crossroads bar on a little highway, mountain highway. And, she observes some strange things, and then there's, of course, these, big, giant, sexy bikers as Harley Davidson riders. And, she sparks with one of them and, starts learning about the things around her that are why things are strange. So there's a romance, but it's kind of a small town, more contained, in that area. And, but then we bring in some scary elements from the supernatural world that they have to face. And by the end of the book, things kind of go bad. There's a cliffhanger ending, and book two comes along, and we have a new man coming on the scene who's a different kind of shifter who Selena has to escape town with. So we have him come into the picture, and then he and the first man are rivals. So we have kind of a headbutting heroes kind of situation going on for book two, but then they end up joining forces or supporting her and the alien enemy, who's an alien prince, but he's lived on, he and his brothers have lived on Earth for thousands of years since the time of Mesopotamia.
Hmm.
And so there's that culture and that kind of mystique brought into that alien culture. But they end up, being kind of supernatural race on their own in their own
Hmm.
unique way. And so there's another man that comes in book three. He's the antagonist trailed through the story, and so Selena is kind of making her choices, and all this great romance stuff is going on through the book, and culminates in some exciting events at the end of the story, and where she makes her final decision.
Hmm.
And so there's lots of good adventure, romance, action, dangers, challenges that they face, and
Hmm.
it just turned out to be this really amazing, fun adventure to go on.
Perfect. Thank you, Darcy. Well, it's been absolutely lovely chatting to you. And thank you for joining us on Introverted Indies. Take care, everyone.